This is BBC News. I'm Matthew Emery-Waller. Anger and upset after the Taliban changed their minds and again blocked Afghan schoolgirls from the classroom. Secondary schools are expected to open today, with girls allowed back for the first time since the Taliban takeover, before a last-minute U-turn.
The ones that did come, they've now been left devastated by news that we've just received that apparently secondary schools for girls will not be reopening. I've seen girls crying.
In a moment, we'll be live in Kyiv as Ukraine approaches 4 weeks since the start of the Russian invasion. Reports of a fight back against Russian forces in a suburb west of Kyiv, with areas said to be recaptured.
And I'm Lisa Doucette in the Ukrainian capital, where the mayor says that there's fierce fighting north and west of the city, but the Russian advance, he says, is being held back.
100,000 people, though, remain trapped in the besieged city of Mariupol. Ukraine says Russia won't let them leave. The BBC hears from a survivor of the attack on the theatre in that city that was being used as a shelter for hundreds of women and children.
I heard a loud clap and the sound of breaking glass. A man pressed me to a wall and covered me with his body. It was so loud. After the explosion, I could hear people screaming.
Hello and welcome to BBC News. We start in Afghanistan, where the Taliban have ordered girls' secondary schools to close moments after they reopened. Teenage students and teachers were left stunned and disappointed by the unexpected U-turn, a move condemned in international capitals. Well, a spokesman for the Taliban's education ministry told reporters the group's leadership had decreed that schools would remain shut until a comprehensive and Islamic plan had been drawn up. Well, that meant scenes like these, schoolgirls filmed in class in Kabul early on Wednesday morning, scenes that lasted only a matter of hours. Well, shortly after these pictures were filmed, the order came to suspend teaching. Well, this was the result. This was also filmed in Kabul, but the scene was repeated right across the country as girls picked up their belongings and filed back out onto the streets. Well, our correspondent Secunda Kermani sent this report from outside a school in Afghanistan's capital.
Well, the day started so promisingly. All the girls who gathered here have been telling us how much it meant to them to be back in school. There are far fewer than usual, perhaps just 10%. Maybe because so many of them were nervous about what would happen, were unsure about what would happen. But the ones that did come, they've now been left devastated by news that we've just received that apparently secondary schools for girls will not be reopening. I've seen girls crying.
I came here full of hope that we'll be resuming our studies, but we were told our classes won't be happening. It feels really bad. Why aren't we allowed to study? Learning is compulsory for both men and women. I don't understand why we aren't given this right.
We had been expecting that secondary schools really pretty much right across Afghanistan would be opening up today for teenage girls, many of them for the first time since the Taliban took power in August. We do know that female education is a sensitive, controversial issue amongst, let's say, the most hardline, the most ultra-conservative elements of the Taliban.
All girls' high school are informed they will remain closed until further notice. When a comprehensive plan has been prepared according to Sharia and Afghan culture, the leadership of Islamic Emirat will issue an order.
We were at a school in the west of Kabul today. There were teenage girls in tears because they've been told that they have to go home again. Who should they blame for this?
Each drop of our sisters' tear is valuable. I can only comment on issues related to the education ministry. We had made all our preparations. This order came from top leadership, so only their spokesman can comment on it.
Well, Freshta Karim is an Afghan children's rights advocate who for many years advised the Afghan government on how to improve literacy and child protection in schools. She left the country after the Taliban took over last autumn. Welcome here to the programme. Your reaction, first of all, to this abrupt change of mind today that we had?
Matthew, thank you for having me. I think it's absolutely heartbreaking. I haven't seen anything as painful as this. It looks like as if the nation is just mourning, all of us.
They cited uniform as one of the reasons. I mean, they've had plenty of time to consider all of the issues since August, September. So what do you think really lies behind today's decision?
I think it looks like an absolute excuse for Taliban to keep the Gaza schools reopen. As you said, they had a lot of time to provide their ideas about the new uniform, and also the uniform of the girls are absolutely Islamic. We are an Islamic country. We have lived for many centuries as an Islamic country. So Taliban cannot really claim to come and change ways of people's ways of life, claiming a different Islam that we don't know, and they're not providing any details of what exactly do they mean, what kind of uniform it is, and is it worth for them to keep the schools closed?
What do you think? If it is not the uniform or anything else they've said publicly, what do you think, or what do you suspect is really behind this decision?
Probably there could be two reasons. First, Taliban do not believe in the right of women to education. That's also could be one of the biggest reasons. And the second is the division between themselves in their leadership on whether they should open it or keep it closed. It appears that there's a lot of divisions on the decision making.
What do you think the international response should be?
I think, first of all the Islamic countries should release statements and provide Taliban with arguments that why Muslim countries who are living and who are allowing their girls to education, are they not Islamic? I think Taliban should provide arguments or kind of convince us that whether no one else across the world, no other Islamic country understands Islam, is it only Taliban? And I think the international community must send the right signals to Taliban that unless they do not respect human rights and women's rights, especially the right to work and education, there is no way that they will be recognized. They wouldn't be anywhere near recognition. But also in larger picture, Taliban must become accountable to the people. Right now, they have got their power through the guns, and they're preserving it through the guns, and that's why they're not valuing popular opinion in the country. Unless we do not bring Taliban and to accountability mechanism where they get their power from the people, they will continue doing this.
You have so much experience in work in this area. We've now had, 6 or 7 months when secondary schools have been closed to girls. What do you think the impact already has been? And do you worry at all that what has become practice in the last 6 or 7 months with girls not going to school, perhaps the danger is it becomes the norm?
Absolutely, Matthew. This is not just 6 months for Afghan girls, it's almost nearing to 3 years. First, it was COVID-19. Second, the war deteriorated and the security situation got really worse, so children could not go, girls could not go to school. And now it is the Taliban's ban. So girls have lost almost 3 years of learning opportunity. And I think it's impacting their mental health very much. They're feeling traumatized by this experience, depressed sitting at home. Secondly, they're feeling discriminated and they're pushed and forced to feel inferior than their male citizens in the country. And third, I think it is impacting our country as a poor country. 97% of the people is below the poverty line. And if girls in this country are not educated, we're never going to be able to get out of this problem of poverty.
Farishta Karim, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us live here on BBC News. And do stay with us. We'll have plenty more on this story on today's Global. A little later, we'll be speaking to UNICEF out of New York to get their thoughts on these developments in the last 24 hours. Now, let's turn to Ukraine, and tomorrow it is 4 weeks since the start of the Russian invasion, and in the last 24 hours or so there have been reports of Ukrainian forces successfully fighting back in a town west of the capital and also in areas in the south. Ukrainian forces are reported to have retaken the town of Makariv, west of Kyiv, and they're also attacking Russian forces in the south of the country. The southern town of Voznesensk has already repelled an attack by the Russian army. But in the port of Mariupol, Ukraine's president says around 100,000 civilians are still trapped without food, water or heat. Officials say Russian bombing raids have turned the city into, quote, ashes. Well, let's head to Kyiv first of all and talk to our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette. And Lise, where you are, of course, we've seen the lifting of that latest curfew. Just take me through some of the conversations, what has been happening there in the capital through the course of today.
Yes, another 35-hour curfew ended here at 5 GMT, 7 o'clock local time, but then it gave way to what's being described as one of the noisiest moments. I think you can still hear the boom of artillery. The morning was marked by sustained artillery fire, louder, closer, Russian artillery fire. Also the constant sound of small arms fire, sustained for about half an hour. And in days since Russia invaded Ukraine, we used to occasionally hear the rattle of gunfire at different points of the city, but this was the longest we had ever heard. And now in the last half hour, constant thuds and booms as both the sound of outgoing surface-to-air missiles being fired by the Ukrainians, but more artillery fire. And we heard from the mayor of this city, Vitaly Klitschko, earlier today, who talked about fighting north and west of the city. We'll hear more from him in a moment. But he also confirmed that they have taken back Makariv, and we've heard in the last hour that parts of Irpin to the northwest have also been taken back after days of fierce fighting. Let's look at all the latest developments, not just here but across the country, with our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse.
This war was always Russia's invasion, but it's also become a story of Ukraine's resistance, and today, fight back. Mykolaiv to the west of Kyiv's reportedly been retaken. The regional chief of police there posted this patriotic video, complete with dramatic music. The Ukrainian flag flies once more, he says. Similar has been happening in southern cities too. Russia isn't stopping though. It continues to bombard Mykolaiv, where Tamara is in labour.
It's scary, but not as much as on February 24th, when the Russians began to shell Mykolaiv from all sides. Over time, every day, you get used to it more and more, especially when the explosions are somewhere far away. It seems that they're in another state. And then yesterday, here, near the hospital, just 500 metres opposite the maternity hospital, it became scary again.
Doctors say there's been a new wave of births here, caused by women going into labour through stress. In the southeast, President Zelensky reckons there'll soon be nothing left of Mariupol, where 100,000 people are still trapped. However, one of the bosses at the city's port has told the BBC it's still intact, reflecting how strategically significant the Russians see it. In a Kyiv hospital, Ola recovers after a shell landed close to her home. She shielded her 1-month-old daughter with her body, meaning Victoria wasn't hurt.
I woke up with her screaming, and it was accompanied by the sound of glass crashing, alarm, fire, cracking. It's like a catastrophe. I just heard her shouting.
Here in the capital, people are making the most of a curfew ending, as well as this warm spring sunshine, to claw back some lost normality in their lives. The sound of artillery and light gunfire can occasionally be heard echoing through neighbouring streets as both sides start to dig in. Ukraine's government has announced 9 new temporary ceasefires to try and help people escape the fighting. More sanctions, economic punishments are expected to be announced by US President Biden today. So far they haven't slowed the fighting at all. James Waterhouse, BBC News in Kyiv.
Well, today in this warm spring weather, and the fact that at least the heart of this capital still remains safe, the mayor of this city, Vitaly Klitschko, along with his brother Vladimir, both former champion boxers, held a press conference at a very symbolic location right next to a statue of Saint Michael, the patron saint of this city, the protector of this city. And he told us about how that the Russians have been trying to advance and encircle this city for the past 3 weeks, but that their efforts at approaches have been halted by Ukraine's resistance. The Russians are getting closer to this heart of the city?
No. The Russians try to be close. The Russians try to make a circle around Kiev, but our soldiers destroy the plans of Russians.
But we hear the sounds that the explosions are coming closer into the heart and not in the outskirts now. They're close to the center. Closer.
Russians bombing and make a rockets attack to the Kiev. Also, the center of Kiev also was not so far from center of Kiev. Also destroyed the buildings and the subway station was destroyed. They try to come, but I promise you, as mayor of Kiev, as citizens, they never come to Kiev.
Can I just ask you the Russian charge that they hit the shopping center because there were military vehicles there? It was used as a weapons storage?
Propaganda in Russia works so well. They explain every attack because they were fighting against Russians. You, as a journalist, was in many places. I see you. Did you see in apartments building some military places? In the school and preschools, military places, and shopping mall, also military places. They was the Ukrainian soldier, and that's why we destroyed them. It's Russian propaganda works so much, and they zomb the people and explain liar. They liars, and that's why don't believe Russians.
The mayor of this city, Vitaly Klitschko, underlining that there is, as always in every war, a battle for the narrative and a battle unfolding on the ground. And this, of course, is a country where the president, Volodymyr Zelensky, now addresses not just the people of this country, but people watching around the world, addresses them to tell them what the latest is. And every night he tries to rally the spirits of both soldiers and civilians who are standing up to the Russian advance just about to hit its 1 month mark. But every night he also tells the rest of the world, as he did again today, that while Ukraine is grateful for the support it's received, it's running out of weapons, as he told the Italian parliament yesterday that Ukraine was on the verge of survival. In other words, that it was getting close. Yes, they were holding back the Russian advance, but the longer this goes on, the more weapons that Ukraine will need. And of course, he wanted that message to ring loud and clear before the meetings in Brussels tomorrow, where we're expecting to hear from President Joe Biden and other leaders talk of more sanctions, more powerful weapons. But Ukraine wants most of all, to use their phrase, to close the sky, a no-fly zone which has been repeatedly rejected. But President Zelensky is certain to keep asking.
Lise Doucette, live there in Kyiv. Thanks very much. Let's pick up with exactly what Lise was saying, because as she was just describing, President Zelensky every evening making an address to Ukrainian citizens, but also to international capitals. And today he continued to do that in an address to the French Parliament, and he urged French companies to get out of Russia during that address to the French Parliament by video link. And before he started speaking, he received a standing ovation. Have a look at this. And after that, we heard President Zelensky urge those French companies, including the car maker Renault, to get out of dealing with Russia. A list of French companies that he spoke and listed to French lawmakers. He then went on to make this emotional appeal.
You know what liberty, equality and fraternity means. Every time we say those words, we know it's important for you. The Ukrainian people and I know that feeling. We look to French leadership to help us find a way towards peace with Russia and to put an end to this attack on liberty, equality and fraternity against everything that makes Europe united, free and diverse.
Well, that was President Zelensky in his address to the French Parliament. Now, a Kremlin spokesman has said that Vladimir Putin could use nuclear weapons if Russia faced an existential threat. Well, it matches some of the incendiary rhetoric from pundits and experts on Russian state television, which often takes its lead from the Kremlin. Well, this was an exchange from a programme broadcast on Russia 1. Have a look.
Европе надо передать простую вещь. вы получите ядерный удар по территории Европы. В случае, если вы соберетесь там с какой-нибудь миротворческий контингент НАТО создать, в случае, если вы соберетесь его куда-то там вводить и прочее, прочее, да, это будет ядерная война.
А это было и сказано французским
Это будет ядерная война,
журналистам
вы должны
8
это
февраля.
понимать. Значит, храбрые поляки, от вашей Варшавы не останется за полсекунды ничего. Храбрые немцы, так сказать, да, храбрые эстонцы, храбрые прибалты. Кстати,
Let's speak now to Carl Bildt, who's the former Swedish Prime Minister, now the co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Carl Bildt, welcome to the programme. That was pretty chilling listening to that, and I was looking at a social media post from you saying that we have to take things like that seriously. We can no longer ignore stuff that's on Russian state television.
Absolutely, sorry to say. I mean, these are completely insane voices that we find on Russian television. But we should know not everyone is on Russian state television, to put it very mildly. They are put there as a deliberate attempt to move Russian public opinion in support of this particular war and perhaps in support of further aggressive designs that are in the continuation of the horror that we are seeing now. So we might consider them completely loonies, but they are sending a political signal, and that political signal is highly, highly disturbing, and we should take it seriously.
Clearly, everyone disturbed by those references to the use of nuclear weapons. But again, even today, Joe Biden, Jens Stoltenberg voicing their concern around the potential use of chemical weapons, which I suppose tallies with whatever intelligence they're seeing. That seems to be a real concern in Washington and other capitals.
Yeah, that seems to be the concern. But I mean, even normal weapons. In this particular television clip, you said they indicated they could sort of invade Lithuania and Poland and deal with areas around Kaliningrad or the Baltic countries. They can do that with the thousands of tanks that they have available in the Russian army. I'm not saying that is imminent. I don't think that is. But the direction of the policies of an increasingly desperate regime in the Kremlin, we must see that it is profoundly dangerous. We're going to see further weeks, perhaps months of horror in Ukraine, but we can't exclude that the voices that we see on Russian television, that they represent what we might see thereafter. I hope not.
It clearly is dangerous, exactly as you say, but what should the West do? We have that crucial NATO meeting tomorrow. What, in addition, do you think the response should be?
I think sanctions are important, but sanctions work only long term. What is absolutely essential is to increase the flow of relevant weapon systems, ammunition and whatever they need, because the only thing that now counts for Mr. Putin short term is to stop the advance of his army. He's intending to escalate. He will throw further army resources, further tanks, further soldiers in order to grind down and destroy Ukraine. We can only stop that by sustained and accelerated weapons deliveries to the Ukrainian army. Sanctions, fine, but they don't work immediately. Weapons do.
A final quick thought. Do you acknowledge that potentially here we may be in for a very long conflict?
Yeah, I do. I do. Mr. Putin is in this particular battle to win. He will not accept to lose. And he will escalate until he either wins or collapses.
Carl Bildt speaking to us there live from Stockholm. Thanks so much for joining us once again on the programme. Thanks for your time. Now let's get more from Mariupol, because communications have been cut for just about as long as the bombardment has been going on, for about 3 weeks now. Pictures and first-hand accounts, though, continue to emerge. Last Wednesday, we saw that Russian strike on a theatre that was being used as a shelter for hundreds of women and children. We still don't know how many people died, but the BBC has spoken to one survivor, Maria, who'd been volunteering with the Red Cross. She'd been actually staying in the theatre but had left to find food. This is what she saw.
It
happened around 10 a.m. I was near the main entrance. People were queuing to get hot water. Someone from the field kitchen gave me fish remains to feed my dogs. They hadn't eaten anything for a long time. When they finished, I tied the dogs to my bags and was on my way outside to get them some water. When I got close to the main entrance, I heard a loud clap and the sound of breaking glass. A man pressed me to a wall and covered me with his body. It was so loud. I was stunned. One of my ears really hurt. I thought that my eardrum had split. I didn't lose consciousness, and I think my eardrum was just slightly damaged, because after the explosion, I could hear people screaming. I believe most of the people in the drama theatre survived. I lived in the hall. It had a big chandelier, and people tried not to let people be there, as it was the most dangerous place inside the building. Inside that hall, there were around 30 people, so I assumed they all died. Most of the people were in the bunker, but I wasn't there. People told me it was just a theatre basement where they kept props.
Well, just one eyewitness from that attack on the theatre in Mariupol. I just want to briefly return to our main story, the U-turn by the Taliban in terms of girls at secondary school. The UN Secretary General just saying in the last few minutes that the decision to suspend girls attending school was a profound disappointment and deeply damaging for Afghanistan. So a condemnation from the UN Secretary General just in the last few moments. We're going to take a short break. When we're back, we're here with John Simpson to talk about Ukraine.